When you think of the worst Call of Duties, which ones come to mind? Modern Warfare 2, Vanguard, Ghosts, or even Cold War? But I'm missing one, and that is Infinite Warfare. The community has always had a vendetta against this game, but did it deserve it? Let's dive in. Like most important historical events, it's important to know the context of the time period. So pull out your closest writing utensil and glass of Mountain Dew, and let's break down where COD was at the time. It's 2013, the year COD was surrounded by dogs and questionable gameplay choices. Yes, I'm talking about COD Ghosts. It was clear Activision wanted to take a different direction that year, with the Ghosts being their newest IP, rather than making another Modern Warfare or Black Ops game. Ironic. The year turned to 2014, and COD fans were itching for the next COD game, as Ghost wasn't really meeting their arcade shooter desires. That's when a trailer dropped that changed COD forever, or at least for the next 3 years. I'm talking about Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. COD was finally getting an overhaul in the creativity department and taking steps into the future by implementing not only a technologically advanced setting, but also by changing the movement as we knew it. We now had to learn how to operate exosuits. Exosuits allow players to fly back and forth and reach areas and positions never before possible in Call of Duty. This was the innovation and fresh take it needed. While the game had lots of problems, it was a fun year overall, and the game was received fairly well by the community. Then, in 2015, it was Treyarch's turn to take a swing at this new movement system and futuristic setting. Call of Duty Black Ops 3 was a runaway hit. No COD game had ever performed as well as the Black Ops 3 did at launch. Community hype was at an all-time high. Content creators were pumping out insane amounts of videos, and everyone and their mother owned a copy of Treyarch's masterpiece. They'd taken the exosuit system of Sledgehammer's AW and refined it in such a fashion that movement had never felt so crisp in Call of Duty. There was wall running, swimming, flying. But towards the end of Black Ops 3, fans had slowly begun to be over the futuristic movement and setting in Call of Duty. They wanted to return to the normal boots on the ground gameplay that fans had fallen in love with back in the late 2000s, early 2010s, which Infinity Ward saw as a totally valid argument. Of course, it just made sense. Let's go back to boots on the ground gameplay. So yeah, fans were mad. They didn't want any more of this futuristic nonsense. They wanted good, old-fashioned COD. And honestly, myself included, I wasn't that excited for this game. I was, however, quite excited for Modern Warfare Remastered, except for the fact that it was being bundled in with the game just to force you to pump up Infinity Ward's sales numbers. I mean, come on. This remaster came with everything COD 4 had to offer and more. It was the entire game remade with some additional microtransactions involved, which was actually a little scummy when you think about it. And then they released the game separately the next summer, so players no longer had to buy Infinite Warfare. Yeah, Infinity Ward and Activision really haven't changed that much. Despite that, this is where most players stayed for the entirety of the year. I enjoyed my time on MWR, but I will say it felt like the gameplay did get a little stale, and maybe it didn't age as well as I thought it would. The really cool thing about Modern Warfare Remastered was they did have a ton of events and really cool camos and skins. With this, a lot of people missed the content that IW had to offer. And in hindsight, I think it's a little disappointing, as IW actually has a lot to love about it. While it wasn't a flawless game, it wasn't as awful as we made it seem. A major selling point that isn't the multiplayer for each COD game is its campaign. Okay, almost every COD game. So how does Infinite Warfare's story hold up? Well, let's jump into the plot. I won't give too many details away to not spoil the entire story, as I believe everyone should go give it a shot, but I'll summarize it briefly. The story takes place far into the future in which Earth is running out of valuable resources. So humanity has jumped to space to fix its problem. There are two factions. One doesn't really like people on Earth and wants to stop it from getting the materials it needs. The SDF. The SDF and Earth beef is never truly answered, which makes the plot a little weak, but whatever. The real shining star is the characters and their writing. Each character has a purpose, and they're written in a way that makes them easy to sympathize with. You care about every one of them, much like you'd care for characters in the old CODs. Then, when bad things begin to happen to them, the game just doesn't have them happen for the heck of it. The story actually earns its emotional beats through great relationship building. The stakes feel high the entire time, and by the end of the game, it leaves the players feeling reminiscent of Halo Reach due to the death of your entire squadron and the people you swore to protect. Most tragically though, and maybe one of the top saddening moments in the franchise, the death of Ethan as he sacrifices himself for the mission. Why is this like Halo Reach? Well, your character Nick Reyes also goes out with the squadron on their final mission. Let's have a moment of silence. Sure, a flimsy and generic plot might sound bad, but it's saved by the amazing characters and performances by the actors. Mix that with great graphics and the art direction of Outer Space, and honestly, you have one of the best COD campaigns in the entire franchise. I mean, at least it's not Modern Warfare 3. The multiplayer is where Infinite Warfare begins to falter a tad bit, but not by a whole lot. I'll start with my main complaints. For one, I think the color palette is just okay. Black Ops 3 had so much life and color. Its vibrance and saturation would lure players in and made for great looking gameplay. I know a lot of people like to hate on Fortnite, but how nice it is to look at is the reason why a lot of people play it. Infinite Warfare, on the other hand, has a little color. Sure, there are certain parts of the map that have touches of greens and blues and reds, but overall it's just a whole lot of grays and other metallic colors. While this works for this setting, it doesn't leave much for players to latch onto or remember. Although some out of the map areas are genuinely stunning and fit the futuristic setting better than any jetpack COD. Speaking of the maps though, do you even really remember any of them? They're all so generic. None of them stick out, except maybe this one. I can't tell why though. The maps aren't inherently bad in the movement and gameplay department. They work perfectly fine, but come on, can you name any of them? Okay, now try and name some maps from Black Ops 2. You see what I mean? Even with that being said though, there were still a few really solid maps that I do remember loving, like Throwback, aka the one with the giant lemon, Genesis, a remake of Strike Zone and not named after the video game console from 1989, and Scorch, which was just visibly insane with the sun beating down on you the whole match while the planet moves in its orbit. I also didn't really like the artificial inflation of content via the variant system. You could get supply drops in order to unlock different gun variants for each weapon in the game. It could be as simple as gaining extra ammo or the nuclear kill streak. Wait, the nuke was locked behind a gun variant? Yes, it was. I don't know whose idea this was. Having over 3 variants for guns is just kind of lazy and trying to make it look like the game has more content than it really does. I know the current way to unlock weapon variants, your wallet, isn't that great either, but at least with the new COD system, you can purchase what you want rather than buying supply drops and shifting through hundreds of useless weapons. Now, before I get to my positives, let's list off some things that I felt were indifferent on or were just kind of mid. The score streaks were just a recycled version of BO3s, so if you'd use those, you'd had used IWs. The specialists were kind of pointless and once again felt like reused assets from BO3 with some slight bright spots like a robotic dog. Lastly, the TTK was just a little too low, meaning there wasn't ever really time for actual gunfights. So you just get obliterated before you even saw an opponent. Now, I do have some positives, of course I do. If I were to summarize the best parts of Infinite Warfare multiplayer, It come down to the gunplay and movement. The guns in the game were incredibly fun to handle and made each kill satisfying. The time to kill was really quick, but I think that might have been due to fantastic bullet reg, something that Infinity Ward's been known for forever. The movement was also the smoothest of the 3 jetpack games. Take Black Ops 3's exosuits and now imagine they're significantly smoother than they already were. That's what Infinite Warfare's movement felt like. Mixed in with maps that accommodated this system, it felt so fun to bounce around and soar like never before. Mixing gunplay and movement almost gave the game a rhythmic sensation that have players hooked game after game despite the rest of the underwhelming package. Plus, the camo grind was actually enjoyable and gave us 2 of the best mastery camos we've ever seen. Gold, Diamond, Solar, and Black Sky. All of these are some of the most stunning camos the franchise has seen. I also like this normal one you got for doing challenges called Neon Tiger. Reminds me of like a BO1 camo, but it didn't stop there. They also had something that had never been added to Call of Duty since, and I don't know why. They also had an operator grind that made using the different specialist abilities actually fun and worthwhile. Sure, BO3 specialists were better, but I always found myself sticking to just one. Every time on IW, however, I felt like I was switching out a lot due to the fun of the grind. If you have the ability to have Black Sky on your operator and your camo, people knew you were a grinder. I still don't know why Call of Duty hasn't implemented this, especially with something like Modern Warfare 3. Imagine having an interstellar operator and an interstellar camo. This is a golden opportunity to bring this back next year. Please. On top of that, season pass holders got every new weapon that was introduced in supply drops for free. So finally, there was a reason to purchase the pass outside of the DLC maps. So yes, there were some underwhelming things with the game, but there was still a lot of good within the package. The overall multiplayer experience was highly underrated, and in my opinion, it was just wrongfully hated. Let's talk zombies. The entire theme of zombies revolved around movie theaters and old horror movies, as our main characters were constantly getting sucked into the silver screen by an evil guy. Each map was based on a different kind of movie and setting. Zombies in Spaceland is based in an 80s amusement park. Rave in the Redwoods is based on camp slasher movies. The Shuffle is based in the 70s with kung fu and disco zombies. Attack of the Radioactive Thing is based on 50s monsters movies featuring Elvira, and The Beast from Beyond takes place in the future and is based on Alien. Each of these maps were heavily focused on solving the Easter egg and completing the story, much like BO3 maps. What worked in BO3 though is that the maps doubled as casual survival maps for those not wanting to solve the Easter eggs. In IW, it feels as though players can't just play casual and have to progress through the Easter egg in order to have a fulfilling run. While this isn't bad, it feels as though it hinders the casual experience. That being said though, there was still a lot to love in Zombies due to its willingness to try new things. There were also plenty of fun Easter eggs sprinkled throughout. How can you complain when you have an in-game David Hasselhoff to look at? Aside from that, the experience really is just Treyarch Zombies. There's perks, a mystery box copy, and even a dog's round. Overall, it was a nice addition to the package and was one of the few portions of the game to never really get dogged on during IW's life cycle. And I'm not gonna lie, the art direction in all these maps, they're unbelievable. You gotta give props to Infinity Ward when they deserve it. Infinite Warfare was just kind of handed to us at the wrong time. If it had been the first of the Exocods, it wouldn't have been loved, but it definitely wouldn't have been hated. A mixture of bad choices and bad timing led to this game's infinitely low sales, and with that, probably killed Exocods for good. I honestly think if this game had been released in 2018 or 2019, with a modern game coming before, fans would have hated it much less. Jetpack fatigue is what killed this game. Let's look at the big picture. IW is definitely better than a lot of the recent CODs and the directions they've taken, just due to its uniqueness alone. I think the remedy to the COD cycle would to be make each year a different time period. So do a modern game, then a futuristic game, and then an old game. It keeps the cycle interesting, and if Activision really wants to keep doing these games yearly, it would honestly entice more new players and keep old players feeling fresh each and every release. But that's just my thoughts. What'd you think of Infinite Warfare? Was it an overhated secret masterpiece, or was it a steaming pile of garbage that the community claimed it was all those years ago? Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you in the next one.